Oh, you know. Um, we're talking about how do you know? Well, we're answering the question kind of how do you know when it's time to end a project?
Mm.
And it's kind of a follow up. Sorry, I'm like moving papers and stuff. My desk is a mess.
It is a mess. I don't know how you work over here.
Well, since I got back into town, the pretty pretty shortly after I got back into town, the boys started school again. So I don't. When the boys are in school,
You don't work over here.
yeah, I tend to not work as much over here.
It's true because I take over the room.
Plus, I was out of town,
Yeah.
and when I go out of town, like I'm trying to scramble to get stuff done, and things get messy.
Yeah, they do.
So,
You're kind
boy,
of a hurricane.
it is a I don't know what it is, but like we always have the air set
Yeah.
the same. I'm just gonna get myself
I think it's cooler, a little bit cooler outside today, and that's why the air's not coming on, so it feels warmer in here.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna get a little
Towel.
I was also doing stuff like I was putting away groceries
Well,
and like moving stuff in the garage,
yeah.
and it's warm in there, so like
But I'm warm right now too, and that's saying something. So
yeah.
I'm usually super
I'm
cold
also wearing a black shirt. It's the
because
Love
you're
is
out in the
the
sun.
best magic shirt.
Mm-hmm. That didn't make it any
Microphones,
better.
yeah.
There you go. That's my Fairendale shirt.
Yeah, we're
Go
gonna.
ahead
I
and
think.
plug it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that today. Um. So yeah. Anyways, uh, yeah, things get messy when I'm like, trying to get stuff done, and it's just, it's that kind of chaotic. And I kind of like that mode a little bit. Maybe I'm like thinking about this as a potential topic idea. Maybe we'll do this next week, but let me pitch it to you. See
Oh
what you
my
think.
gosh. Okay.
Okay, so I get into this mode, and we've talked about it before, where it's like I can't, like I've got this idea in my head, and I can't bring it to life fast enough. Like
Mm.
it's this kind of energy. But what's also true about that mode is some of the deliberate things that I do in my like week to week production, like making sure folders are organized and doing I have when I make a video, sometimes I'll make a new type of animation, or I'll create a new asset that
Yeah.
I could use for future videos. And so I always do kind of like this breakdown where I'm like, okay, I need to take these assets, add them to the main template, move this file, offload this file from my main drive so it's not taking up storage. Like I've got all these steps that I do. And those steps are very tedious, and I only do them because they serve future me, future me's ability to keep up with regular content production.
Yeah.
And when I get into that mode where it's like, oh, I got to get this out, all of those rules just go out the window.
Right. You're
Um,
not thinking about future me. You're thinking about this me.
yeah. So I think that I feel like that would be an interesting, I don't know how we would frame it, but
Yeah. Future me. You're
I'll
just going to
just,
write future me, and then we're going to be like, what is this? For ideas.
all right. So, are you ready to jump into today's topic?
Yeah.
Today's topic?
Days.
Today's. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Here comes the intro. We'll jump in. What just happened? It didn't do what it was supposed to do. There we go. Oh well. Welcome to the In the Boat with Ben and Rachel podcast. My name is Ben.
And I'm Rachel.
And this podcast exists to be an encouragement to creators. Rachel and I are both full-time creators who work from home, raising a family of 6 kids, and just trying to balance all of those responsibilities with pursuing our passion. And so we hope in these conversations that we have that you feel encouraged and a little bit less alone on your creator journey.
Yeah.
Today, we are talking about something that we have mentioned, I think, in the past couple of episodes, because Rachel just finished a 6-year, it was 6 years, right? I'm not wrong. Okay.
6 years.
It was a 6-year-long project, a book series that she was working on called Fairendale.
It was probably 7 years, actually, like pre-publication.
Yeah.
Stuff.
So if you're only taking into account from the publication of the first one, yeah. So really, 7 years. And the original scope of that project was 30 books, which is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
I think in our initial conversations, we'll get into this too, but we were kind of talking about the nature of binge watching, and we were talking, I think maybe like R.L. Stine came into the conversation a little bit, like those kind of books. We've got, our kids have a few different series of books they enjoy reading that have, like several books in the collection. And so it was kind of like, well, what if we did something like that? Without all the resources those people have, just the two, like you're writing really it's just you.
Well, I mean,
I did the book covers and helped
I did
with
the
some of
heavy
the marketing,
lifting, but yeah, I did.
But it's a lot. It's a lot. So 30 books, that was the original thing. And what was it going to be? 30 books in?
I was going to do like 6 each year. So
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did it end up being, like 7 years and only 20 books?
Yeah. 20 books in 7 years. And so the question we're talking about today is, how do you know when it's time to change or end a project? We have a repair person who's here, and I'm going to go let them in, and you get to talk to folks while I do that.
I'm not sure what to say. I could go a little into, I don't know, I feel much better when Ben's here because he's good at asking the questions, and I don't know what people want to hear, so... As we had mentioned, the project was originally going to have a much bigger scope, and partially what made the decision what it became is in the middle of all of that, we had a pandemic happen, and there was, as a creative person, we had all of our children at home, and as a creative person, it's very difficult for me to have dedicated creative time when my house is full of people, and when even if somebody else is taking care of the people, I feel like I kind of have to be there at the same time. And that's probably just a personality thing. It could be a mother thing, but it was very clear to me early on. I think that year I only released 1 book in the series that was originally planned for 6 books every year. So that kind of slowed me down a little bit. And then as I got through the series, I realized that in order to take it from 20 to 30 books, it would need a lot more plotting, and I'd have to take characters through a more circuitous route for certain things. And so it seemed like it was unnecessary. And I think that's what I finally came to, is that if something is unnecessary, I don't need to keep doing it just to do it. So I think that's part of what, in any creative project, especially with writing projects, I tend to plot all of my stories and I plan them out. But in the writing of them, it often changes a lot. And I always want to be open to that change. I don't ever want to say, well, I plotted this particular thing as being the ending, and now as I'm writing it, there's a different ending. I always just want to be open to that, whatever the curve of creative work is. So that's partially what happened with this project too. So I know that Ben, when he gets back, is going to have some more intuitive questions about, like, how do you know when enough is enough and those sorts of things. But that's, for this particular series, it was more the scope of the project just felt too big and I needed to tone it down. And also I got a little bit weary of fact checking, which is something that you have to do with ongoing series. You have to fact check to make sure what you said in one book is consistent with what you said in another book. And it was a very tedious thing. I talked about the pandemic and how that kind of slowed me down. And I think that was the year that I went back to the drawing board and was like, I don't think this is going to need 30 books. It just seems like it would be drawing it out unnecessarily, kind of thing. I feel like I'm not being very clear or helpful, but
No, it's okay. I wanted to make sure I wasn't gonna like make you rehash stuff you'd already talked about.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily intending for you to have to talk about this topic while I was gone. But
okay.
whatever you covered,
Yeah.
like we can definitely
Yeah.
use. So
Yeah.
So I guess I could just come in with some questions and we could kind of go that route. So you mentioned that you started to reevaluate things during the pandemic. You had slowed down, and I'm thinking back to that year. That was not the year that we had the freeze, right?
No.
Because that was 21. So 20.
It was the year that we had all of the plumbing issues, and then we went into the freeze.
No, the plumbing issues was after the freeze.
Oh, was it? Oh my gosh, I don't even remember.
No,
it's like
okay,
all
so
of these things are.
Yeah. So here's kind of how it was.
Yeah.
Early 2020, the pandemic hit and threw everything into chaos. All of our systems, like we had spent years building systems based on a world where like it wasn't dangerous to be in person with other people.
Yeah.
So, like school stuff, anything that we did, grocery shopping, getting together with friends, that kind of thing. And so, and that was an experience that just about everybody was having.
Mm-hmm.
But we went from, having, so we had, our littlest was not in school yet at that point.
Right.
But he was really easy. He was the only one at home. And we went from having relatively fair amount of free time during the day, able to focus and get some work done and do things. I think the year before that, like you'd been releasing books, I think 2018 maybe, or 2017, a year or 2 years before that, you had a super productive year. Mm-hmm. And then you had some traditionally published books come out. And so there was kind of this momentum and expectation for what 2020 would look like.
Mm-hmm. Because the youngest was going to school.
And and the youngest was going to be going to school in the fall. The pandemic hit in March, or April, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's the
And
longest spring break ever.
all of a sudden we had 6 children at home trying to do online learning with computers, and kids were watching YouTube
Like
instead
really
of doing their
old
homework.
computers too, because
Yeah.
we don't have like
I almost started a fire because I didn't have the right adapter for one of my old computers, and so I tried to actually hardwired.
Yeah, you did.
Don't do this.
Never.
But I hardwired. No, that's what it was. The charging port was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And so I opened up this old computer and I hardwired the adapter to the charging bay. And one of the boys came over one day and was like, "Daddy, the wires are melting." And that's why you don't mess with electronics unless you're an electrician and know what the heck you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I obviously did not. So it was 2020 was just a super challenging year.
Mm-hmm.
The kids weren't able to go back to school right. We were fighting with. We took a very conservative approach to the pandemic. When I say conservative, I mean we're erring on the side of caution, saying, okay, we don't understand this thing yet. Obviously, our institutions are still trying to figure this out. So if our institutions are still trying to figure this out, then we definitely shouldn't play around with this. So we were being really careful, limiting our in-person contact, wearing masks everywhere. And our school district, which is in a very red county, was being very cavalier. And so and at some points during the year, they were actually making moves that were, in our view at the time, putting kids and teachers and administrators and people who were working in the schools at risk unnecessarily. And so, I got involved going to board meetings and stuff like that. So it's just a very stressful, very contentious
Well, and
year.
several of us got COVID.
Yeah.
From school.
So then,
yeah.
Then 2021, we had a freeze and lost power for
it was like
a few days. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
they found me shivering under a blanket, about to die.
Yeah. I mean, maybe
I wasn't about to die, but it was pretty cold.
And then you had a really severe bout of COVID that year, just after we had a catastrophic plumbing incident in our home that caused
oh yeah, so it wasn't 2020 that we got COVID, it was 2021.
Yeah, half of our home was unusable, and so we went from 8 people in a about 2,000 square foot home to 8 people trying to operate in
1,000 square feet. Yeah,
wasn't great.
Yeah.
I was working an extra part-time job at the time, and so I was super stressed out. I was working late nights, and it was just,
we were burning the candle at both ends, basically. All that to say,
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean
on
to
a big tangent there, but
yeah, all of that to say, yeah, of course you felt burned out, thinking the idea of being creative and trying to produce something, and you're at that point, I think 16 books in.
Yeah.
And it's okay, I'm just a little bit more than halfway.
Yeah. I do remember having that thought.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's I'm just a little bit more than halfway.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to keep doing this.
So this started out, it was supposed to be a question.
Yeah.
And it really became, I think, an exploration of the circumstances around that. But I feel like that informs a lot of what went into that decision.
Well, and I think in other people's creative lives too, that can certainly be an impetus for ending something. If you reevaluate and you think, my circumstances today are very different than when I started this project, maybe it's time that I tie it up a little bit, because I did say, when you brainstorm these things or you have these ideas for long-term projects, it's good to have an idea of where you're going, but it's also good to remain open-minded enough to say, I think this has probably reached its conclusion, and if I draw it out anymore, it's just going to be unnecessarily drawn out, and it's not going to be my best work, maybe. And then allowing ourselves that permission to say, this was a great season, and I'm just going to fold it up here. It's kind of like the TV shows, when they sign on for a certain number of seasons.
Yeah.
And then they kind of have to prove every season after that the season is worth it. And I feel like the ones that have signed up for long seasons end up not being quite as good as the ones who have to prove that the season, like, there should be another season, because sometimes you can just draw out that project and draw it out, and it just doesn't, you're doing things unnecessarily, and it's like fluff kind of thing. Like you're trying to make it longer than it should be.
There's definitely, there's kind of an art to that. And I think there are two ways to think about it, because if you think about it from your own personal assessment of your work and kind of that, how you feel about the quality of the work you're producing, I think it's really easy to have a sense of if I keep going with this, I'm not doing my best work. I'm stealing time from other things that I've got, in my mind. But then there's the experience of the audience who's consuming that work. And I think that I personally, when I think about, it's really, for me, it's TV series and stuff.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't read a lot of book series, but it's the lesser of two evils kind of situation where I dislike the feeling of watching something that I know probably should have ended.
Right.
This is, this is definitely overstaying its welcome.
This has no point. Yeah.
I like that feeling less than the feeling of, oh, I wish there were more of these. And I can, just off the top of my head, I can think of a couple of examples of shows that are like that for me.
Schitt's Creek.
Yeah, Schitt's Creek is one of them. The Good Place is one of them.
I haven't watched all of that yet, but yeah.
And some of them, some of these have really satisfying conclusions.
Right.
Some
but
don't.
You just love the characters.
Kim's Convenience was one of them. I was like, oh. And that actually was a situation where it was canceled early.
Yeah.
There's the classic Firefly.
Yeah.
Some people know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not coming back. I'm afraid to tell you.
Yeah.
I've looked into the future.
Not even a reboot.
Yeah, they did. They tied
they
up
did the movie.
They tied up some stuff with the movie. Fleabag, 2 seasons.
I know.
And that's it. But I'm left with such a. It's bittersweet. I feel a little bit unsatisfied, but at the same time, I kind of feel a sense of gratitude and that kind of thing. And, versus I'm just over, I'm stuffed, I'm full.
Yeah.
And you just keep on feeding this stuff to me. And it's after a while, it feels a little bit gratuitous, I think is maybe the right word. You're the word person.
I know, but my brain's a little slow today.
Yeah, it feels like excess.
Yeah. So I guess in our example about, when when it's time to end something, there are really two different ways you can kind of evaluate, and one is based on audience and one is based on your own personal, it's either your circumstances or how you feel about the project and where it is. So I think I tend to gravitate toward my own feelings. I think that people probably would have enjoyed more Fairendale books, but I just wasn't willing to invest in them. I felt like the time had come to wrap it up. So I feel kind of challenged about, taking the audience thing too into consideration, because, if something is popular and people are clamoring for the next book, why wouldn't you capitalize on that? Suck it up. But I don't know, is that the best? Like, I don't know creatively if I would feel fulfilled doing something like that, just for but you got to get paid, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because it really becomes more a question of like, it's really a philosophical conversation about how you think about art and the idea of selling out. And is it like there's kind of this justification of, well, if it's something that's making a lot of money, and I know that if I release another book, like that one's going to make a lot of money too, maybe there is a room for a calculation in there about what helps your career stay sustainable.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I need to make the next book because then that will give me enough runway to get to the next project and not worry about whether or not that's profitable. And that keeps that kind of keeps that project pure. I'm not going to be as worried about like, trying to make it commercially viable. I can really put myself into it. But then, some people will come along and say, well, what's wrong with, like, if it's popular and people like it and you're not completely sick of it,
yeah,
make another one.
Yeah.
And cash in on all of that capital that you've built. I tend to probably be more on the, like, I guess, romantic side of the equation, where I'm like, no, but it's like, it's the art and it's this thing and it's pure. And if I, make it this commercial thing that I'm just milking for cash, then I'm taking away from the beauty of those stories and that kind of thing.
I tend to be that person too, but writers don't get paid enough, and so now I'm trying to change my perspective and say, you know what? I might just start writing
romance novels.
Seriously, that's where the big bucks are. So, I mean, I'm not going to stop writing for kids and, teens, but now that I'm done with Fairendale, I have some time to.
Yeah. And to be clear, when we're talking about writing romance novels, you're not writing those for kids or teens. Those
right.
are strictly adult books.
Yeah.
But very profitable.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and that's a question too. It's like, what if you do those things so that it's kind of like this concept of, like, 3 for them, 1 for me. It's like,
that's hard.
or whatever the ratio is, but it's like, you're like, I need to satisfy the market. I need to make something commercial because I need to make a living, but I also we need honest artistic expression. We need to be able to put ourselves into something without feeling like we have to shape it into something that's not true to who we are.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that kind of comes into play in the whole calculation of like, do I continue making this thing, or, is it okay to stop?
So how do you make that decision?
Well, to be honest, I don't think I have a lot of experience with
Long-term projects.
yeah. And really the part of the problem that I experience is I get excited about something.
And you jump in and then fizzle out.
Yeah, and I say, "Oh, this is, like," and it's either something big enough that it's not. I guess really it's more relevant to serialized type projects, like things that have ongoing content output. And that is definitely, like, as far as projects go, that's one of my weak points, is just like ongoing, consistent. Um, but like, this podcast is an example of one of those, and we haven't set like a specific number of these. We talked last week about breaking it up into seasons, but we don't have any plans or criteria for when or if this podcast will end. A previous iteration of this podcast was dependent upon the efforts of people who worked with a studio or with like kind of a group that we were a part of. And when that went away, that was kind of like, okay, it was an inflection point. We decided we were going to pivot, change the podcast name, do something different. And then I think we recorded 2 episodes and like,
It was really hard to find the time at that time.
yeah. That didn't have anything to do with the pandemic, but
Well, it was, yeah. Our kids were really young at the time, though.
yeah.
So
Yeah, so I guess all of that to say, it's hard for me to speak from experience.
what about for the documentary that you made? How did you know that was done and you didn't need to record anything else, any other material? I feel like with creative projects, there's always, I tell writers this a lot. We can revise and revise and revise and revise until the end of time. But there comes a point where we have to say, this is my best work today. And this is what I've got,
Yeah.
And I feel like that has to be a decision that everybody makes about their own work. But in the case of like a documentary, and I know, when I was a journalist, trying to get all of the information that I needed for a story was sometimes difficult because it seemed like there was always something more that was needed.
Yeah. That was interesting because there was a story, and the story was very timeline based. And I knew going into it that like kind of the big event was a documentary I made called Tough Nisi. Is about my friend Nisi, who has cerebral palsy. I can't say that correctly. Cerebral palsy. And she competed in Tough Mudder, which is an obstacle race. And just, if you're a typical able-bodied person, I'm trying to say that the right way. I'm trying to make sure I don't.
If you don't have cerebral palsy.
If you're a typically abled person, it's challenging.
Yeah.
And you still like need a team of people to help you with it and stuff. And so the story really was about like answering that question, like, how is she going to do this? And the answer and kind of the lesson in that story was she had to have a team of people, and she also like really challenged herself, made a lot of personal changes to make it possible for her to even do it with that team.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, that's true for all of us, for any of us. It's, any challenging thing that we do in life, we do rise to that challenge. We do like work to change ourselves, to make ourselves, to make it possible to take something on. And still, like, we need help. We need people around us. We need a team. And there's, there's no weakness in that. So that was kind of, so everything was centered around that Tough Mudder race. And when that was over, there were a few follow-up things that, like, we wanted to hear the story of that experience from Nisi. And so that was a big thing we wanted to capture. But most everything else was telling the story leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had already captured that stuff. It's
so it was more a timeline based thing for you.
Yeah. And at the end of it, there is, like, you've got all the footage, you've got all the interviews, and I had a pretty clear, like, the story was there. And I suppose I could have looked at that and I could have been like, I could bring in this other angle, and I could,
Mm-hmm.
It ended up, the runtime ended up being like 40 minutes or something. I definitely could have made it longer. But I had never done anything that long form before. And I also, like, I knew that the story I had, it was compelling. It flowed really well. And there was kind of this risk that if I tried to bring anything else into it, I risked messing with the cadence of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's intuitively what kept me from going back and trying to. I was also working against a deadline.
Yeah.
I'd said I was going to release it by a certain time, and so
sometimes it's nice to have that deadline.
Yeah.
To say, okay, I got to be finished now.
I was editing and rendering, and
Mm-hmm.
like, we were releasing it in a theater, and so it had to be in a specific format, and I was having a lot of trouble with that. Like, day of, I think I made my.
Oh, or you no, pulled an all-nighter.
It was the night. Yeah, it was the night before, and I delivered it to the theater that morning for that evening's showing.
And
so
you hadn't slept at all.
Yeah.
I remember that. So having a deadline can definitely help, because that, tells you, okay, I have no more time to do anything on this.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm also hearing, and this is also true for me, is that we have to trust ourselves as creative people and trust in our process and our ability to say, this project has run its course and it is now time to end,
Yeah. And yeah, so there was kind of an intuition, there was a gut feeling, and that's, I like that, and I also hate it, because there's not really something like tangible or practical that you can be like, when this happens, that's how you know it's your gut.
Yeah.
But it really was like just this sense that I felt of, like, this is a complete story. This has a really good pace. This has a good cadence. This says everything that I want it to say. And adding anything to, and that's kind of what the editing process is you're trying to remove anything that's not necessary from the story. And so, like, when you get to a point and you've already done a lot of editing, it would feel unnatural to go back and, like, add stuff in. Unless there was, like, if, and sometimes you see this in movies or shows or books, like, there's kind of this weird jump or something that feels like
it came out of nowhere.
It came out of nowhere. It feels like a rough transition, or it's like, I don't get how that fits in the timeline, or just, and that happens. I think there are sometimes when the constraints keep people from being able to add things that they need to, in order to make those transitions smoother. Um, but yeah, I think is kind of that intuition um, and being able to I think that is a skill that you can work on, and that comes through
practice.
It comes through practice, but I think it also comes through consuming, like tuning your storytelling ability um, is something that happens through storytelling, but it also happens through consuming great stories. And so,
you know how many books I read a month?
Yeah. So video is my medium, and I consume tons of video content.
I'm trying to watch more too, just to know what's out there. And most people watch instead of read, so I shouldn't say most people. I don't know if
that's people. Probably true though.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's so sad. That makes me sad. But
it's just less work. But there's something you can do with books that you just can't do with movies and video, and vice versa.
I'm just kidding.
I me being a film person, I've really enjoyed, I liked reading The Martian way more than, I enjoyed that so much more than watching the movie. And the movie was awesome. But the book was just so good. And I can see why it was we've got to make this a movie yesterday, All right. So I'm going to go, we got a doorbell ring from the repair person again. So I'm going to check that out. Okay. You want to close it out after I get back?
Yeah. Be quick there. Does anybody have any questions? Nobody's asked anything. By the way, our kids are not here right now. They're in school, so that's why it's so quiet and we look a little less haggard. Maybe a little less. I'm not good at talking by myself. Awkward. I promise we're going to close it out when he gets back, so. So Cody says, you've been talking about finding good stopping points for good projects. When do you know when a project has failed and to stop pouring your soul into keeping it alive? I think that can probably be something that you look at both from the perspective of yourself and the perspective of an audience. So I think after you define what it means to fail at a project. So I have a really hard time saying that a project has failed because when I release a book into the world, I'm not necessarily looking at, the first even few months of sales or numbers and things like that. But when I release something into the world, there's a backlog of things where in the writing world, especially the kids writing world, they term it a long tail career. So you release book after book after book, and as you grow your audience, they'll keep looking back at your previous books. So I have a hard time with the term fail, because I think for me, when a project fails, it has more to do with my internal feeling about that project. So if there are some books that I have published that I have since I guess retired, because I feel like it served for a time, and then either I became a different person and didn't necessarily feel like it was my best work anymore, or this is so vague, but or I felt like the message that I was trying to share did not, it had changed a little bit in the years since I had written that particular book. So to me, I guess it wasn't necessarily a failure either. It was just that I, as we continue to grow in our creative projects, we continue to become different people too, because growing in creativity happens right alongside us growing in age and in maturity and in the things that we learn and do. And I don't feel like I'm ever fixed at one point in time. I'm constantly trying to learn new things and better ways, and I guess better ways to be a human. So the question of, I guess you kind of have to figure out, what does it mean to me for a project to fail? Now there are some, in like video work, there are some things that you can look at. I'm not sure what your work is in, like if it's video work, if it's something else. But there are some numbers that you can look at, and Ben would be able to say more about that. But I know that this might be like a peripheral example. But for a long time, one of the messages that I heard as an author is that you need to be on all the social media platforms, you need to grow your audience and all of those things. So it was probably 3 years of coming up with content that I could post on all of these different social media channels, because I didn't just want to be there and post, what I was eating or whatever. I wanted it to be something that people could find joy in or have encouragement from. And so it was like 3 years of dedicated creating content for all of these things. And it just finally, after that 3 years, it felt like it was going nowhere. And so I finally I don't necessarily consider it a failure, but I also had to reevaluate how much time I was spending on that. Like you say, pouring your heart and soul into it, and it's getting zero response. It wasn't zero response. It was I'm talking about the social media stuff that I used to do. And I finally had to say, this is sucking a lot of my time, a lot of my energy, and that could be better spent elsewhere in a way that is both more fulfilling for me and can connect with my audience a little bit differently. So I still occasionally come on social media, and I might continue some kind of thing in the near future, because I just got so burned out I had to take time away. But I have a newsletter, you know, where I connect with my readers, and I had to find a different way to do that didn't feel like it was a constant. I guess it did kind of feel like a constant failure because I was spending so much time creating this content, and it was, you know, it was doing hardly anything. And so that, I guess there's like a feedback loop that you get with some of the, you know, the likes and stuff. And I started feeling like I was depending so much on that I needed to just take time away from it. So
yeah,
I was trying to answer Cody's question.
It's a great question. I think I like want to dedicate a whole episode to answering. I love the distinction you made, Cody, between like kind of what we've been talking about and failed projects.
Yeah.
That's a
well, and I told him too, I have a hard time with the word fail because I kind of see like I kind of feel like everything has a reason for that. Sounds so trite, but I feel like everything that we do makes us better at what we do.
Yeah, it's kind of this philosophy that there's nothing wasted in creative effort.
Can you find the first book I ever published anymore? No, you cannot.
I think the first video I ever published on YouTube is still up there.
Yeah.
And it's
we unpublished
something.
A lot of my old videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I left it up there because it's a great example of like
how far you've come.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really, and in creative work, I feel like we have to be very, we have to be kind to ourselves, you know, because the writer I was 6 years ago is not the same one I am today. I mean, I've written, you know, 40 or 50 books in that span of time. And with that much practice, you're going to become better at what you do. So I feel like I can say things so much better when you're here. I don't know what it is. It's very strange.
It's hard talking to, like, you know, people are there listening,
but you can't see them.
You can't. Yeah. There's something about having the nonverbal feedback and that kind of thing that makes it a lot easier. Like you can see in real time that the things you're saying are making sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good stopping point.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of interruptions in this episode, but thanks for
Next week will be different because kids are gone. There won't be any.
Yeah, no kids. I think either next week or the week after that is going to be our last one for this season, which like the timing isn't great because we have all this extra time, but I think it's good. We'll take advantage of the extra time and
come back in season 2
uninterrupted time to edit stuff and actually publish the podcast. There's a new feature on YouTube also that is or it's like a podcast category, so we're going to try to figure out how to attach this show to that. Because I think they'll have some functions within the app where you can like listen to it.
That's cool.
Without having to watch it at the same time or whatever. Anyways, so yeah, we'll talk about that stuff a little bit more in the future.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for tuning
Sticking around.
And we'll see you next time.
All right.
So the elliptical machine is working.
Yes. Hallelujah.
But we identified a handful of other problems.
Oh, good.
that he submitted an order for. So
that's great. Okay,
yeah,
good.
But he says in the meantime it should work.
Y'all, I do a lot of running, and then whenever I have injuries come up, or if I feel like an injury is about to happen, I do the equivalent on the elliptical because it's a little bit lower impact, and I can still get the cardio that I need to maintain, 10 and 12, 15 mile runs. And the elliptical has been broken. It actually like cracked. This is a really nice elliptical, and it cracked while I was working out on it, and like I almost fell over and took it with me, and it was like it could have been a bad accident.
The repair technician is pretty sure, because he actually fixed, those bolts in the front, the one that was sticking out because it wasn't screwed in all the way because they said it was stripped.
Yeah.
He fixed that.
Oh, that's good.
It doesn't squeak. And he says that that's probably what caused that.
That happened.
There was just too much stress on that. He thinks that also caused some of the bearings to give out earlier than they should have, which is the sound that we were hearing.
Oh,
so
see?
Like it's all connected.
Wow.
There's also like,
I'm not a heavy person either.
It
like,
wasn't installed correctly on the back, and if you actually look at it, it's crooked. So it was doomed from the start.
Yeah.
And these installation techs, like these, okay, I don't like the way this works, but it's kind of just how it is. Like these fitness companies that produce these machines hire installation techs, contract with installation techs to come out and assemble these things. And I think, I mean, we don't have a lot of experience with it, but I think it's kind of hit or miss whether you get good installation techs or not. And we did not this time. And it still lasted for, I mean, you use that thing
I use it all
lot,
the time. Yeah. I mean, I'm on it for hours sometimes whenever. Yeah.
So, I mean, imagine how long it would have lasted if it had been installed correctly.
Yeah.
This is Nordic Track, by the way, and I don't mind saying their name because
I wasn't going to, but yeah, it's kind of frustrating.
I mean,
they're expensive machines. Like they should last. And yeah.
Yeah. And it's a good machine.
Yeah.
So like my review would be pay really close attention to the installation, and if anything looks off, like make them do it over.
Yeah.
Or make them send you a new machine or new techs. Like be super, super picky about that first part of the process.
Yeah.
There's probably a metaphor in there for like, I don't know, trying to make this a creativity thing.
No, it's true. Yeah, be super picky about your first part of your process, and then the rest will fall into place.
Way to bring that. So anyways, it's up and running again.
And I'm about to be up and running again too. So.
Yeah. Like you're literally after this going to go use it? No. Okay.
Soon after this, but
after this, I'm going to go have a blueberry donut.
He eats while I work out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it serves me pretty well. I'm a relatively healthy guy. All right. We've gone quite a bit over.
Yeah. Sorry, we're being silly.
Yeah. But thanks for hanging around. It was great getting to spend some time with you today, and we will see you next week.
See ya. Homemade, no.
Oh, the blueberry donuts are not homemade.
They're
but
HEB.
They're HEB.
So good. We like them better than like other.
Like if you know, you know. So there's some good donut places. There's actually one close to us that's like
it's a local one.
It's locally owned and operated. It's not a franchise, and we try to get donuts from them just about any time we get donuts.
Mm-hmm.
But these blueberry donuts from HEB are so good.
Yeah, they like melt in your mouth.
Yeah. I'd say the ones from the other place are comparable.
Yeah, they are.
It's just not as convenient because you got to drive.
Well, we were in the store today.
Yeah, we're in the store.
So.
The donuts are there.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, all right. Now we're going to sign off. Goodbye, everyone.